Hi, everyone. Welcome. Happy Monday. Thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 1084th New Social Environment. I'm Eleanor, a programs associate here at the Rail, and today I have the huge pleasure and privilege of being your MC for a conversation featuring Pepón Osorio and Dan Cameron. And now it's my joy to introduce our guest and host. Pepón Osorio is known for his provocative, large-scale multimedia installations that merge conceptual art and community dynamics. Osorio has worked with over 25 communities across the United States and internationally, creating installations based on their real-life experiences. New York-based curator, art writer, and educator Dan Cameron launched his career in 1982 with Extended Sensibilities at the New Museum, the first institutional effort in the US to examine gay and lesbian identity in art. In 2007, Dan founded Prospect New Orleans, the contemporary art triennial to benefit the city after Hurricane Katrina, and organized the first two editions. More recently, his book on Nicole Eisenman's paintings was published in 2021 by Lund Humphreys. Dan and Pepón, thank you so much for joining us here today, and it's my honor to pass it over to you, Dan, to get us started.
Wonderful. Eleanor, thank you so much for that introduction and greetings, everyone. It's a beautiful Monday afternoon in New York, and I am so honored, thrilled to be able to spend part of the afternoon with all of you, but especially with Pepón Osorio. Um, I've known Pepón's work for just a touch over 3 decades. And actually, if I can, I want to just sort of swing my very, very short impromptu introduction into my first question, because I was thinking about it this weekend, Pepón. And one of the things that I find fascinating about the moment when you came to our attention, and by our, I'm speaking collectively of just New Yorkers in the art world, it was a moment in which performance, video, installation were all very much the language, the lingua franca of the art world. And a lot of that work was coming from, I'm going to say, a more or less conceptual basis, a more conceptual structure, because it was more experimentally oriented. But your work was very, very different. Your work had a quality to it that was really much more about emotion, about feelings, about pathos. And I was wondering if you can kind of just take us back there for a little bit into the early years of your work and give us a little bit of a description of how you experienced the context that your work first came out of and led to, for example, the incredible work Badge of Courage when it was presented in the 1993 Whitney Biennial.
Yeah, sure. I have to say, Dan, Cameron, that it's a pleasure to talk to you today. We've crossed paths in the path in the past, but it's really wonderful. And I I wanted I think that without reminiscing, I just wanted to go back again in retrospect and tell you where I was. The image that you're seeing, no crying allowed in the barbershop in Navarrete, se llora. It's like kind of like back to the 90s, but I during the 80s, I had more friends in the performance field that I had in the visual arts. And that was because my my sort of like the person that pushed me into all this was Median Soto, who I collaborated for many, many years, who is my wife and my lifetime partner. And I was working, and I'll be very brief, but I think it's important. I was working as a caseworker at the Human Resources Administration in New York City, working with families and working with clients of child abuse and neglect. Median lived on Canal Street, and I'm sure that if you're from New York, you know where that is, on the corner of Canal Street and West Broadway. So my day was coming from the Bronx to work on Lafayette Street, to go and hang out with Median on West Broadway and Canal Street. She had a loft. And we became really, really close friends. that process sparked my curiosity, and I started to make a right on West Broadway and began to look at all the galleries that were happening, there.
Just by pure happenstance, pure serendipity.
Absolutely. And curiosity. So and accessibility, because those were right there in front.
Sure.
You didn't have to go through a bridge, you didn't have to go, through a pathway to get to those places. So that in itself made me wonder about the experience that I had with my family. My mother's a baker, and how all that three-dimensionality that I was seeing reminded me of my mother's cake, the one that she baked for sweet 16s and weddings and all the different events in people's life. But anyway, all this to say that somehow, somewhere, Median and I began to work and collaborate, and I wasn't even thinking about becoming an artist until I was admitted at Columbia University back in the 80s. I lost track of specific dates. So that experience in itself brought me to understand and to see the possibilities in the art outside of what had been established.
So really, if I can paraphrase it
Yeah,
slightly, your first experience with contemporary art and installation and video and performance and all that, that linked in your memory to these very personal experiences that were very real and very intimate for you.
absolutely. And it's Walter de Maria, Broken Kilometer, that it was at the Dia Foundation on West Brother at that time, that I kept looking at it and understood at that time that there was a metaphor behind the installation, that there was a possibility to connect with few things that real life didn't offer at that time. So I began to work and I began to develop this thing. We showed, I can't even remember, it must have been 1985 at PS1. And that was the first big collaboration that Median and I had. It was something related to popular culture. And I'm very irreverent and also very difficult person. But I'm telling you, I treated that installation and I treated that performance as if it was a quinceañera. It's like almost like a wedding. And I just went all the way with it, and understanding what it took in popular culture to actually deal with the process of it. The more that I was getting into that process, the more that I realized that I was bringing with me the reality of that I had as a caseworker in the Department of Human Services. So there was no disassociation. Years later, I realized that what I was doing was really unfolding that experience as a caseworker into the performance space, which explains up until this moment the theatricalization behind my work.
Mhm.
That's an experience that I'd never removed. Fast forward to major exhibitions in New York City, like the Decade Show, and a few other ones which I was not included, and it makes perfect sense because I was paying attention to something that it was not within the realm of visual arts. I think I was thinking, in those terms. So yeah, it's a process that brought me back again, and it gets more complicated because I'm the kind of a person that thinks that why make it simple when it can be really complicated. And I move forward, and I'm getting to the work that it's right now.
Sure. Well, so again, it's your experience with as a caseworker with your clients that first creates that emotional connection. But you, as you mentioned, you've always got your own family and personal history rolled into it because something is triggering memories of other things. It's
Right.
like a Madeline for Proust. You experience a certain texture, certain colors, certain combinations, and suddenly you're at a different moment in your own life.
Right. I think that I have never been able to distance myself from others. And I always think that the more that I think it's about the other, it's about myself, but I'm seeing through the lens of other people. And I think that was the experience. I'm almost sure that that's the experience and the beginning of all my work. I'm looking forward to talk about this last one because it's the first time that I include myself in the pieces together with the people that I work with, or that I collaborate with.
Coming
But
full
anyway,
circle, almost.
yeah, so what you're seeing, it's the installation, No Crying Aloud in the Barbershop, come from a personal experience that I had growing up as a boy of African descent. My father was so proud of me, and he wanted to give me, he wanted to send me to get the first haircut with the wrong barber, who did not know how to cut hair with a barber, with kinky hair. But I realized that in the entire space, something that I'm becoming more and more aware, I was absorbing all the imagery that it was in the barbershop, and it made perfect sense. And then I connected that to manhood and to the distortion of manhood, which is machismo. And I started to connect all that stuff, and I brought it together in this installation. It's a homage to my father. I saw the image before, was a frame of an oval frame of my father, and then there you go. And then that in connection to everything else that made perfect sense, not only to me, but to a lot of other young men that grow up with this kind of super macho role model. And then little by little, they begin to question it, and they begin to look at it. Needless to say that I embarrassed my father by just crying my eyeballs doing the haircut, and that's how it happened. So fast forward many years, and I remember my work is also based on memory. I remember all that experience, and I just wanted to bring it in and let it out of my psychic.
I think the other thing that's amazing for a New Yorker, taking removing you as the author of the piece and just talking about my experience. I've lived on the Lower East Side of Manhattan since 1979. So, being in a, overwhelmingly Hispanic neighborhood, it's, mostly Puerto Rican, Dominican, and Colombian. The barber shop and its relationship to the block, to neighbors, and how the barbershop functions, not just as a place of business, but as a social center. I know we've seen it in movies, dealing with Black culture. But what I felt when I first walked into this piece was this feeling of like, oh my God, I'm re-entering a space that I already know, that I see all the time, that I pass, that's sort of part of the, my own neighborhood, which I was adapting into, I guess you could
Right,
say at the time,
right.
trying to sort of integrate myself into. And your pieces were sort of this portal, into a sort of a way that you could be spatially intimate with the details, with the objects, with the figures and the frames. And you didn't have to worry about being in an actual barbershop where nobody would ever let you carry on like that.
Right.
So that was wonderfully freeing for me as a spectator
Mhm.
to understand that I had this place to myself.
Right. There is, it's a wonderful description, but I have to also to add that there is a little bit of a tension in my work because I really wanted this, as a contradictory as it might sound, I really wanted this to look like a beauty parlor more so than a barber shop, And so there's always that tension in between the work, because I live in an environment where women take care of our households, where women take care in a community where women are the leaders of households, right? And so the
Mhm.
minute that you walked into the living room, it's really everything. It's been programmed and somehow determined and envisioned by women. And so these environments that you go in, I wanted to somehow make that a point in the barbershop and the other piece in the badge of honor. And there's something about it that it's very painful in asserting your presence in a very different way, and
Yes,
that's
yes.
exactly what I was trying to do. That rather than close it down to the men, I really wanted this to open up to everyone, and to those women who have not had the opportunity to acknowledge or given the opportunity to acknowledge that they exist in communities. So yeah, that was the other side of it.
So there's a gender hybrid in a
Oh yeah,
way.
absolutely.
That is
And
something I wasn't seeing the first time, but
you see it,
now. Now I do, now that
yeah.
you're pointing it out.
And if you look to the right of those mirrors where it looks like flowers, that's a giant tattoo that says "Forgive me, Mother,"
Right.
which is also, I don't know if it shows in the other slides, but which is also the intention of making. This is there's a lot of different places where the exhibition has been seen, and this is the most recent, the barbershop at the new museum. This was the setting there.
Let's look at Badge of
Yeah,
of Courage, which I think is the next one anyway. Badge of Honor.
badge of honor. So after the barbershop, I spent a little time in looking at the after effects of the exhibition in the context of a storefront. And then I realized that a lot of people were coming in to see the work. We were giving very specific hours, similar to that of museums. And then I realized that the places, the environment where these pieces were shown were completely different, and people operated completely different. So Badge of Honor is the beginning of connecting to that kind of world where I gave myself freedom not to replicate the museum or replicate the traditional exhibition space, but to allow myself to connect with the immediate environment and see what works. So the hours of operations were 12 to 7. That's where I saw the most traffic around. And it was closed Sundays and Mondays, and it was open until Saturday, because Sundays very few people. You see very few people out. But anyway, Badge of Honor is the relationship of these two men, father and son. I went with the carousel. Yes, I am that old. I went. I went with a slide carousel to lots of oh my God, lots of prisons, and I show the earlier slides that I've made with I mean the earlier work that I've made to the guys, because I was looking to make some sort of a connection with the father. So all this work also belongs in happens in the context of a much larger social and city event. I don't know if anyone remembers, but Badge of Honor was in 1995, which was the time of the
Million Man March.
the Black Million Men March,
March.
something like that. Yeah. So I really wanted to connect with the men who were in prison, and I also wanted it to begin to do a piece about that, but I wasn't sure. In most of my work, I don't know what to do, because I mean the one with the barber shop had stayed in my mind and my psychic for I don't know how many years, and then this one was probably like I don't know 10 years in my brain, you know.
Wow.
So eventually, when they come out, I know exactly what I want to work with and what I wanted to do. And basically, I did that. And then I never solicit others to work with. Usually, people come to me. I've always said, and I heard this before, but I have to. I've always said that there's stories around, and I'm just waiting for them to land.
So as an example, how many prisoners roughly would you say you visited, talked to, shared your work with until one prisoner, I guess, proposed to you that you work together?
Yeah,
How
I would say about 10.
About 10?
10 setups. And
Mhm.
I went around and finally this guy, well, there was one that came before, but we couldn't make it because of his health. And finally, this man came over and he says, I'm an artist and I want to work with you. And then we began
Wow.
a conversation. And so I asked him, You have to convince your son. I don't want it to do it all about you. You have to convince your son. I still then did not know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to work with two people. And I wanted to work with his son. So for about a month and a half, I went from the son's house to the prison cell once a week.
Oh
And
my.
it and I began to talk to them I began the conversation with one word. And that's how it had happened. I had the camera on my shoulder. I was actually working with a videographer, Irene Sosa, and who went with me. We got permissions, which is another story. But I had the video on my shoulder, and I asked the kids, the son. I asked him, freedom, and he just went on and talk about freedom.
Right.
Absence, and he just went on and talk about absence. And every time I recorded this with the son, I went to the father and I played what the son had to say, and
Hmm.
vice versa. And so the second time, the other person I didn't have to tell them a word. The word was already said, and then they went back and forth. The recording of this is endless, and I narrowed it down to I think it's 17 to 18 minutes. And I guess this is the beginning of Zoom, I didn't know. But I was very, and so I played, I created both their environments, or at least my interpretation of their home environments, and then I played the video and simultaneously have them talk to each other. Um,
And
and
I don't
so,
know if I'm assuming everyone has already experienced this piece in person, but in just in case you haven't, um, I've never to this day experienced a work that struck me emotionally as deeply as that did. I mean, you must hear countless accounts of people just weeping as they begin to listen to this, story. Everyone has issues. Well, not everyone, but a lot of men have issues of fathers being abandoned by fathers, having their fathers taken away from them. So this gap that you filled with this sort of it's love, but it's also suffering. And it just goes back and forth and back and forth. And it's sort of like you almost can't decide for yourself which is more unbearable, to hear, like the yearning or this sort of like just almost confession of like I need you but you're far away, and it's just one of the most amazing works I have ever experienced in my life, and every time I see it I think maybe I'm immune this time. Maybe it won't get me this time, and it always does.
thank you, thank you. I think that there's a triangular relationship in this work where you stand there as a viewer, and I think we're experiencing more and more now than ever, that you experience other people's life. Like when I get on the subway, I hear everyone's life,
Mm-hmm.
because they're on the phone or because of whatever reason. But I think that that's a responsibility, that an ethical responsibility that we have. And with this work, you're standing there and you create a triangular relationship. There's a triangle between the father and son, the father and you, and the son and you. And so you're standing there, and constantly this triangular thing where you are implicated as a viewer, but also the relationship of what it means, if you're empathetic enough, what it means to you personally.
And also, you're getting to experience what neither of them can experience. You know what
Right,
I mean? So it's not intentional, but you also are sitting there experiencing your own privilege, that you can actually stand back and watch a real-time interaction take place that in the real lives of these two people is impossible.
right. And also you see what you wanted to see and what you are able to see, both spiritually, physically, and mentally, and emotionally, of course. You see what you wanted to see. And this work, and a lot of the other work, I'm experiencing that now more than ever with this new piece, Convalescence.
Well, let's
It's
go to the new piece, but can we hear this? I think there's some
Oh,
video here.
sure,
That
sure,
we,
sure.
that we,
About Yeah,
couple minutes maybe.
Dad, did Abuelo ever forgive you?
Abuelo's grandfather.
He forgave me in the dream. And now that I really think about the question you asked me before, Do I think my father forgave me? Yes, he did forgive me. He did forgive me because in the dream he forgave me. So I would say yes, he forgave me. And I just, it was so beautiful, you know, to see your father after so many years not seeing him. I felt good. I was happy. I woke up happy that day. I was just like, I called mommy up, and I told her, Mama, you know, hon, I had a dream with my father, and it was something because I got to see him. I got to see him. You know, just seeing him again was like, wow, you know.
Well, Dad, there is one dream that I had about you that, like, I was a cop and there was, like, I was going in with my squad for a drug bust and you was, like, the dealer or whatever. And, like, once we got upstairs, like, we caught everybody and, like, you ran and I went after you and then, like, once I saw you or whatever, like, I just stopped and, like, we both had our guns out and you just dropped your gun and I dropped my gun and then I don't know what happened and we just hugged and then I woke up.
I hear you, Nelson, about your dream, and I think it was a real nice dream. And I want you to know that in this life, Nelson, if in order to live a good and straight life, you have to forgive. You have to forgive, Nelson.
Well, Dad, I just
Wow, fantastic.
Thank you. That's 2 minutes after of 18, but I also wanted to say that these are real life, real people, real experiences, and no script. And most of the work that I do, I am so engaged with the people that I'm collaborating that we do everything in one take. The minute that we need to go into the second tape, for me, has always been a waste of time. So usually the people that I collaborate with, we just do one take, the very, very beginning. And I set it up and usually has worked so far, which is also the case of Convalescence.
Um, I also feel like the amazing level of trust that the interviewees have placed in you to be able to open themselves up that way. Maybe in a way that they wouldn't have been able to if the other person was right there present in the room, but they do it via you as a conduit, and it's very powerful. But let's talk now about what you're doing in Philadelphia with Convalescence, because I just think this project is extraordinary.
So this is at Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia, where I reside, and it's I was invited. Actually, no, I persuaded them, and then they invited me.
Eventually, you're invited, one way or the other.
This is not a simple, matter and process. But I have been wanting to do a piece after I was diagnosed with cancer 6 years ago, knock on wood, and um, and I started to go to chemotherapy and heard many stories. Again, I have this whole idea, quality, I guess, that people come to me and tell me their stories. So we were there in the chemo therapy waiting room, and people will just automatically sit next to me, gravitate, and begin to tell me their stories. And I panicked and never wanted to somehow connect because I was trying to deal with my own healing process. And so lots of beautiful stories. And then finally, one day I woke up and I said to myself, I have to do something about it. And I finally came up with this idea of convalescence. And it is that once you're diagnosed with any illness, you will forever be in a state of convalescence. You don't get better. You do get better physically, but mentally and spiritually, you are in a state of convalescence. right? And so this idea that you will never be the same began to grow in my mind.
Hmm.
And I started to look at how the health and hospital corporations, at the same time that I was looking at people of color in relationship to that, and how some are treated one way and others are treated differently. And I began to work on a piece that is, again, real life, real people, real stories, and people that came to me with the work. This one specifically, it's just, and by the way, this is unfair. It's not unfair, but this is the first time that I talk about this work. It just came up like at September 3rd, it opened. So it's the very
Ah,
first time that I talk about it in public. So
wow.
that's why if I sound a little hesitant or bumpy, it's because of that. But this is a hamburger card that this guy had, and we started to talk, and he was we became not friends, but quite comfortable with each other.
Right.
And he finally mentioned about his illness and why he wanted to quit his job. And I just thought, oh, that's interesting. I wanted to do a piece about that, I said to myself. And so this is the very beginning, almost the seed of everything else. Convalescence, you see the image on the right, it's me. And lots of different stories I can tell you, but that's the image of me being the narrator of what I knew was going to be a much larger piece. On the right, it's the guy's hamburger card that he quit his job, and somehow I inherited his card, and I had to do a whole piece. I haven't seen this slide before. I mean, really quickly, but I hope that there is a slide with him in the front, and I began to work with him in this installation. Now there isn't. The
Can I pause you just for a second, Pepón? I'm struck by something that you kind of um, went past, and I know it was meaningful for you, but I just was wondering, these were all stories that you didn't want to hear. That when they came to you the first time, you were like, "Get out of my space," or I don't know. I mean, I don't really know, but that I'm intuiting that that was sort of the feeling.
right, and it's story.
One day you woke up and everything was different. That was what I was trying to go. Do you have any thoughts about that? One day you woke up and
Yeah,
it was a different moment?
absolutely. So the stories that it was given to me were given to me at a time, and I have this thing that I have to be in alignment physically, mentally, and spiritually. And during that time, I was not. And so I cannot commit to any of this work unless that's lined up, right? And so it got to the point where it began to to be lined up, and I started to think that this was a possibility to do, and that I could tell the story the right way, with the right respect and the right way of channeling people's stories through my work.
And it was partly a result of your own treatment, I'm guessing,
Absolutely, absolutely.
right? So we got the hamburger cart now.
Here's his hamburger card, and that's the arm of the guy who it's a video behind in front of a magnifying glass. So you see blurry images of him getting his blood drawn from his body, and a full dedication in the front, hoping that I will never have to do this piece again.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a little bit more close
There
up.
you go. There you go. So this is the very, very beginning, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about the irony of flowers and how the role of flowers and people in healing. That was at the very beginning. You get this big arrangements of flowers and sets the irony of get well. But the commercialization, the overproduction of caring and wanting people to care, but also finding ourselves in a place that when we find out that someone is sick, we don't know what to do, so we just go and get flowers, right? And so that was one side of it. The whole thing starts from the very beginning, almost as you coming into the space, and there's a scale on a platform, on a aluminum platform, and really tells my own story about how I found out that there was something wrong with my body. You see the flowers, you look at the cabinet with a lot of self-prescribed medication, which is another opioid and another crisis that we have. You turn, you look at this, and then right in front, what I decided to do was to put all my MRIs, all my PET scans, everything that I have in terms of documentation from my process were enlarged on the giant walkers. And I think you see them right in front. I came across some wonderful people to the right who wanted to work with me. They are in chronic pain. I just left the camera, similar to Badge of Honor, left the camera on and recorded them during the day of a time of the day that they feel most affected by the chronic pain. So you see these images, 8 feet by 4 feet in slow motion. Then you walked in and you begin to see the stories as I had been told. I spent about a year and a half with each one of them. And then they tell the story as of what happened to them. This one specifically, it's about an African-American woman who 43% of Black women have been neglected by the medical system in their pregnancy. And so their birth process is a little bit more difficult due to hospital neglect. I matter. Oh, I'm sorry. At the very beginning, it says, I mattered, she mattered, and it could have been prevented. And so what I'm trying to do here is also bring the family's voices and the person's voices into the conversation. You know, this whole thing about timeline. And so I put 2019 through 2019 as the timeline of this unborn child. When I talk to people, images are built. Everything becomes like a metaphor, and so I'm translating their stories in the work as if as similar to the way that I was told.
So each scenario, each sort of, pardon me, mise en scène is a story. It's an individual, and you sort of go from story to story. Would that be correct?
Exactly. But you go from room to room, and each one of those rooms are particularly different. The only connection is the beginning. I'm sorry, the pill bottle. It's the connection. I have the figure of the person made in latex inside of the pill bottle. Also, that makes references to the ongoing profit that pharmaceuticals. I don't. You see it right there in the middle. That pharmaceuticals.
The giant pill bottle.
The giant pill bottles. Each one of them. That's that. The second one, it's of a woman that I've worked also all these people for a year and a half, and she's on the waiting list for a kidney transplant.
Right.
And we talked about how impatient she was to find out where she was on the waiting list, and not at the very top, not in the middle, somewhere in the bottom, and there's a lot of people ahead of her. So all that translate with people lining up in front of her beds, on the side of her bed. When you go to the hospital, for those of you who have been to a hospital, they wake you up at a certain time and they put you to sleep at the same time. So I wanted to translate that in the video as well. Everybody, all these people right now, you see everyone sleeping at the same time and everybody wakes up. And what I wanted it to do, something that called my attention to one of the people that I was working with, and then myself, is that when you are diagnosed with a very critical diagnosis, you really wanted to believe that that's not true. That somehow, somewhere, it's like a dream, and you're not living reality. And I think that somehow you just wanted to disappear in that fantasy. So everybody was talking about their dreams, their reality, as if it was a dream. And it's so beautiful because you're standing there and everybody wakes up at the same time. And then everybody goes to sleep at the same time. In front of her are the kidneys, and she talks, latex kidneys. And she talks about that each one of these beds in front of them have a yellow sort of a vitrine or yeah, like a yellow box.
A
And then
relic.
inside of them talks a little bit about, you know, their saying and their story. It's a extremely emotional piece. That's mine. Over time, you begin to lose part of your body. Accepting that you will never be the same is the hardest thing. That is convalescence. And that's my saying, talking to myself, but also channeling a lot of what other people have told me. Yeah. Um, very
How many stories? How many individuals have
five,
you?
including myself, five.
Yourself? Five.
Me and four other people. Yep. And the beauty of it is the opening happened. All these people came in, all their families came in and arranged it. I don't have any video because I didn't want to do any of that stuff. I don't have any photograph of this. So there's no evidence other than trusting that what I'm saying is true. And they came over and they sat there and they look at each other. And somehow, somewhere, I began to connect to this thing about they are visiting themselves in the hospital. And it
Had
is
they known
so,
each other before? I mean, had the individuals,
no,
they were meeting each other and they were sort of meeting themselves.
they were meeting themselves when they stood in front of themselves. And
Wow.
this is another family. I made a point to pick her up at home and bring her here. A big deal. And it's so wonderful because not only they're looking at their story, but they're also looking at how I was able to tell the story in a way that it was either loyal or fantasized. And all of them were able to connect to the story. And here I am again, you know, making telling someone else's story from a place that I know best because I've been there, you know. Earlier than this, I began to realize that I had been telling stories about many people, and I finally was about time to tell my story. To get this is an aerial view. There is this wonderful thing in this medical environment. This is in the lobby, 901 Walnut Street. This wonderful thing that it is like a corridor, and there's glass, so you can see the installation from outside and from inside. But because it's in a medical environment, you get to see the people that come in with walking sticks, walkers, and wheelchairs. And so you're standing inside and you see an entire community of people outside feeling exactly the same thing that you're seeing inside. It's first time that it ever happened. We were installing and I was at all looking outside and thinking, wow, this is a giant video in relationship to this. And I also try to connect, you know, how do I bring this work outside of its story of origin and bring it in a completely different context? But little by little, I'm realizing in my work that that it's about the idea of bringing the work to where the crisis originated from, right? So before that, it was a reform, a work that I did before this, and it was in higher education. I transformed a classroom that it was all talking about education and the lack of education and the problem, the fragility that our communities are having with education. And this one's in the medical environment with a community that we all know with health and hospital corporations, it's the place where things originated. You know, and then it got complicated with obviously pharmaceutical and the benefits of all this stuff. But it's really beautiful to see how it does a full turn and it circles back again to the place where I think things got complicated. So that's the other installation. She's separated. She's far away, and I'm waiting for the next slide to. Image. Oh, we're going backwards.
Well, I think we were jumping around a little bit to find like
Okay.
to but I was gonna just ask you real quickly, just have you envisioned a way that this project can continue to exist after? I mean, I'm assuming it's temporary or maybe not, because it looks like these are not traditional art spaces. This isn't a gallery. This is a different kind of a public space that you've transformed.
Right. So to go back again to the very beginning of your question, for me, it's about opening up the spaces in neighborhoods or in environments where I think that the audience needs to see it first. Have I put this work
Right.
in a context of a museum? I would have missed that, and people would have missed the work. Everyday people would have missed the work. So I'm always interested, and this happened. It's kind of a joke, but it's a serious one. That with Scene of a Crime, which was after the Whitney Biennial, a big photograph of the scene of a crime came out in the Arts and Leisure, and it took half of the page. And I went to my next door neighbor who had work with me in the piece, and I said, Luisa, look, we made it to the New York Times. And then Luisa looked at me and looked at the newspaper and looked at me. It was a Sunday morning. And she said, Pepón, what the hell is the New York Times? And then I realized that I was creating this work in a vacuum for the people that are not museum goers. And so that immediately, the piece that you saw, the No Crying Aloud in the Barbershop, was the very, very first one that I created in the context outside of the museum first. Then after its viewing, could go into the museum. So this work definitely, it's prepared and able to go to the museum, but we have to see it in a completely different context.
And how long will it be visible in Philadelphia?
The visibility in Philadelphia?
Yeah, the duration of the exhibition.
Oh, this work is up until November 1st. It's well received. It's interesting because my work, because it's not in a museum setting, it runs very, very, very quiet for the first week and a half, and then it picks up. And so I'm just patiently waiting for that to happen. This what you see in it's the two models, the architectural model of the building, and then on the right you see the architectural model for the Botanica nearby. There's only two Botanicas in North Philadelphia, and I wanted it to sort of mirror that at the same time. When you walked into the space at the very, very beginning, you see the image of the visionary, of the guy who gave a lot of money and whose building and space is named after. But the workers on the right, on a very, very similar frame, are the forgotten workers from Jefferson Hospital, from Jefferson University, but these specifically are from Jefferson Hospital. So I also wanted it to sort of balance the whole environment, that it wasn't only leaning into the people that have a lot of money and people that have a lot of access. I was opening up the possibility for other things to happen at that.
Just in case not everyone knows what a botanica is, would you devote a minute to just a brief description?
Sure. Botanica, it's the place where we seek spiritual healing, but also somehow, somewhere, we go there for remedies. It is the place where our grandmothers had the knowledge for healing and for prevention. And what I'm trying to say here is that because the monopolization of health and medication that hospitals have, they have taken away our known traditions. And we have given our lives to the medical field as if we don't know anything.
Wow, and the model was created for the exhibition.
Yes, specifically for the exhibition. Lesko is his last name. I didn't do that model. God, I forgot his first name, but Lesko is his last name. And the funniest thing of all is, like, in my video, I say it all the time. I had a situation with a doctor, and I said to him, you went to school You went to school for medical school, and I believe you, but I've been carrying my body for 69 years. So you don't know more than me about my body. And so it was just a completely different discussion from then on, which is the premises and the essence of the installation. You know, how much we know, what we know, but it's always negated because we have given our bodies and our ownership of our bodies to the medical field
Yeah,
as if we don't know anything.
I hate to keep dragging you into tangents, but was this something you went into the project feeling, or is it was something where once your own treatments were finished and you were convalescing, something clicked in
Yeah,
terms of inverse proportionality of
yeah,
these?
yeah. But it was also in relationship to what other people in the rest of the families told me, and they felt very similar to me. Because at some point I just thought, am I giving everyone a hard time around here? Is it true or is it not true? And then I realized that the more that I was talking to other people in the participating families, I realized that they were feeling the same way. And the reasons was like some of them would say every time I come, they tell me something different, and I'm still stuck where I am, or that they tell you what you want to hear. And so in this kind of a positive way, they don't tell you the truth, they tell you what you want to hear. And so when you go to the doctor, you really have to dig in and begin to do like an introspect kind of a examination, because you know your body knows. You can't be that out of touch with your body. And so then that happened, and it went on. Yeah.
Great. Let's keep looking at a few more images because I think there's a lot of material that we haven't seen yet.
Those
This
are
is you.
Yeah, that's the lymph nodes. And I don't know if you noticed, but my entire body, it's covered with band-aids. It's hard to tell here, but it's covered with band-aids.
And does that happen? I mean, there you go.
No, the stories about the band-aids and the band-aids that I used when I was a little kid that stood out more than a light-skinned person.
Uh,
So I was looking at that and it's like, oh, very early signs, and you don't see it. These are like signals, like, oh, okay,
this is what it's going to be.
this is not new. This has been going on, and what I mean and how important I was for the medical field was secondary to what's going on now. So yeah,
I also think you must have uh, provoked, for want of a better word, some really interesting internal discussions on the
yeah,
part of the hospital staff and the medical staff who are, in a way, they're the subjects too.
right. Too early to tell. I haven't had an opportunity, as I have, and I will, to sit there and watch and have conversations. It goes from weird and for the people just going, it's like, this is really weird, to other people that look at it and immediately connect and understand exactly what I'm talking about because they've gone through that experience. In my case, and which explains for the needles, I decided to have alternative medicine, acupuncture, and which I still go to the acupuncturist and weekly, and that was the way of balancing what the medical intervention that I was getting with the hospital with something else that I felt that it was important and that I trust. The people that are not that don't have, which is many, 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 many people, I'm fortunate to have medical coverage, but the people that don't have medical coverage self-prescribe,
Of course.
and it turns into a completely different situation, urgency. So that's where pills are all over the place. That's a full view of the beginning, and then the other two rooms are past that image of the brain and the
Right.
other one.
And then just the image on the left again is your MRI, the
Right.
thing from the giant walker.
The tools are next to to your left at
Mhm.
the end. Those are mine. On the right, that's a brain tumor from someone who's very close to me, and the one on the left is the same person. And then in the back on the other side, All of them are mine, except for those very two pieces on the right that you see, the brain tumor and then the other. I believe we've seen this.
We have. So the videos must be synchronized, obviously, and on a loop so that they're the same length. And when you said they wake up and go to bed at the same time,
Exactly.
within a certain format.
Yeah.
One of the questions I have in general, Pepón, I'm really, I'm really moved by how you articulate your politics. And I know that your politics comes out of your being an empath, you know, in the sense that you take others' feelings and they come into you, you let them in. And then what comes out has so many different levels of meaning. You know, there's the aesthetics, there's the personal, and there's the emotional. And then your desire to articulate a need for justice always comes through. And that's sort of like, I know it's about your worldview, and I know it's just the holistic way that you approach. But it's amazing to me how there's no preaching going on in your work. There is no finger pointing. There's no political discourse, and yet the political reality is there. It's always, it's ever present. And I'm just, your ability to balance those two just amazes me, especially in this piece.
Mm-hmm. I thank you, and I agree with you. I don't want to take a stand because it's always I don't shy away from taking a stand. I think that the more that I don't want to take a stand, I take a big stand with the work. So it just allow the work to be what it is. I don't like to tell people what they need to see. I am more of I believe in metaphor. I believe in the possibility of giving you the freedom to see as much as you wanted to see or you're willing to take. And I think that that comes from there. But I think that I'm of myself more of a humanist than I am an artist. And I also don't want to cover reality. I don't want to cover it in a way that that you're not able to see it, because I feel it. It's very conflicting. I see other people conflicted with it, and so for me, just the mere fact of showing the conflict, it's a political act. You know, it's like it's out there to see it.
I would also maintain that that degree of empathy is by itself a political statement, because many people feel that. Many people share others' pain in deep and meaningful ways. But that's your springboard. I mean, that's your you know, that's your punto de partido. You know,
Right.
that's you start from.
And I also think that that I am there is that the installation is a debris of the process. And so when people stand in front of it, they're looking at the installation, but what they're feeling, it's that the process that allowed me to get to that place. Where are these people coming from? Who are these people? What are the circumstances? You know, a lot of that comes into place. Unfortunately, we live in a place where in an art where production and process are not as important as the final product, you know, and we relied on the final product as evidence. But in this case, I think that for me, it's the other way around. I think that I involved so many people in the process of it. I would say about 100 people were engaged in the process of this, and all of them have all the people that were engaged. And then in that moment where the work comes up and everyone sees it, they understand what the process is, which really speaks about my most important thing to see. It's the after effects after the work is done, the after effects and the complications that it comes along with it. That's why I call it a debris. It's almost like the very end, the tail of the whole process. And so you're standing in front of something that you know that is very complicated, but that's what politics for me it's all about. It's really, really complicated. It's not as easy as as taking a stand. It's like listening. I demand a lot of compassion and empathy on myself as I demand on the viewer, you know? And so there is that space that is open back and forth and a conversation that feels circular to me as opposed to unidirectional.
Which again is, I think, collaboration on an amazing scale. But, I just got the note that it is time for you and I to end our exclusive one-on-one conversation, which I have loved and would love to keep going. But we've got some questions piled up.
Yeah, yeah.
We're gonna open it up to everybody else right now. Is that right, Chloe?
Yeah, we got
Sorry.
no, it's all good. We've got some great questions from the audience today. And thank you so much, Pepón and Dan, for this incredibly brilliant and moving dialogue. It's such incredible, an incredible installation, Pepón. And it's been such an honor to hear you speak more about it.
Thank you. I just wanted to say briefly, because I know how Zoom
Yeah,
works and everybody disappears. Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much. And thank you, Brooke and Rail. This has been the very beginning of formulating what I have to say about convalescence, because I've never had an opportunity to talk about it until now. So thank you.
Thank you for putting your trust in us.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's our honor. Our first question today from the audience will be from our friend GE. GE, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Pepón. Has convalescence been a ritual of healing as much as it's been one of spirituality? And is that the way that you struck upon this sort of balance of the conceptual and the accessible?
Good question. So for me, healing starts when you believe that things are gonna get better. And I think that the panorama, or at least what I'm seeing in a lot of what I've been reading, it's that it doesn't. And so I'm conflicted between knowing deep inside that I'm okay and things are gonna be okay, and then reading on a medical journal and going like, oh boy, there's a lot of what's coming up that I didn't know. Right. I went through the whole process of chemotherapy, and no one told me that the after effects of chemotherapy related to lymphoma is that there will be secondary cancers developing. They don't tell you that. And so that happened to me. Interesting thing, it's that now I'm under supervision, I'm under vigilance, medical vigilance all the time. So I get to see things before they develop, and that's a positive sign. And it's not as critical and it's not as neglected, as other time. I mean, as the earlier time. Having said that, I went through the process of convalescence in this work, seeing the courage of the other families that I was working with, and realizing that it is possible to get better, and it is possible to reach the age of 80, which with I'm hoping to do through this work, because I saw it in that lady who's 87, and she's going through a lot. So, the body's very resilient. The body can take a lot, you don't want to abuse it, but that's where it's in. And this piece made me realize in many ways that there is a possibility for healing, but it's not the same for everyone else. But I deeply, if you were to ask me, without any doubt, I think that I will be able to heal 100%, or no, avoid a relapse without having to worry so much as I was worrying before, based on convalescence. I hope I answered the question. It's very complicated when it comes to this medical uncertainties and yourself and all that stuff, but I hope I answered the question.
Yes, that covers it very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, GE. And thank you so much, Pepón, for that really generous answer.
And I have to say something else, because it's important that people understand that I'm very much aware that I'm opening up and that I'm telling things that are extremely private. But the reason why all these families are working with me, it's because, I'm sorry, they're collaborating with me, it's because they wanted to tell their story. And here I am telling my story, guarding myself in many other ways, because I have to guard myself. But at the same time, I want people to understand that this is pretty common, and that lately, more and more people, younger ages, are getting cancer. You know, yeah, we need to come out and tell the story.
Incredible.
Thank you.
Sorry, Eleanor.
No, please, please. Thank you so much for that. It's really crucial.
Getting better.
Yeah.
We've got a couple more questions if that's okay. Our next question will be from Charlie at the rail.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Pepón. Wonderful conversation today. Pepón, when I was watching the images come across the screen, I noticed a terrific range of scale. I noticed miniature sort of statuettes along bedsides and the giant pill bottle and the giant walkers. So I just wanted to ask a question about scale and how you made those choices and how you thought about putting them together.
Thank you. Thank you. And so it is a journey. And in that journey, I was very much aware that certain things and certain process are bigger than you, that you have no control over it. And other ones are minute and manageable, and you have control over it. And so that's how scale came into play. It was about things that are completely out of your control, and there's things that are really under your control. And so I kept looking at that and repeating it over and over through the whole thing. I don't shy away from large scale installations, because I do really want people to feel their soul underneath their feet, their crown on their head, and then their side. You know, I want the piece to be able to wrap you up and transport you to other places. And I think in the scale that happens as well. You know, there's things that you get closer, that you feel that you can take it, and there's things that you just cannot take them. So I give you an opportunity to process and to go through a journey of both places, things that are manageable and things that are not. And if you are in a process of any medical intervention, that's real life. I hope that makes sense, but yeah, that's all I have to say.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you, Charlie, for that question. Our next.
And by the way, I'm not making this stuff up. I'm not making any of this up. You know, it's like it's scale. It's just that I've forgotten to talk about these things. But it was intentionally done. Sorry, Eleanor. It's the second time that I interrupt you.
Please feel free. I welcome it. Our next question is from Wendy in the audience. And Wendy, I will give you the opportunity to unmute and ask.
Hi. So Pepón, I want to say I think it's beautiful how you've melded art and life, from the caseworkers to fatherhood to being sick, and you've really brought all that together. My question was, I wonder if you connected at all to Frida Kahlo and all her series of Convalescence.
No, thank you. Great to see you, Wendy.
Wendy.
Same here for both of you.
Yeah. you are one of the few witnesses that saw me in the 80s. But anyway, in performance, not at all. Not at all. I also, there's a side of me that wants to believe that this is not chronic, that it's temporary, and that I'm moving along. And so I didn't connect. Also, I don't foresee myself spending a lifetime in the topic of convalescence. It's not a lifetime practice. It's just I don't know what I mean. I think I know what my next work is going to be like, but it's probably before and after kind of a thing. But it's no influence whatsoever that I know of. Maybe 10 years from now, I go like, oh yeah, right, look at that. But not that I'm aware of or intentionally did that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Following in that thread, thank you so much, Wendy, for that question. And following in the thread about influence, Pepón, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about your use of space and just in thinking about, for example, your exhibition at the new museum, which really creates kind of a world within a space. And then at in the current show, you're using the space to kind of create a world and create attention, draw attention to, yeah, life and the world and your experiences. And it made me think about other activism that is using space and disrupting space. Like I was thinking about Nan Golden's work with pain, and I was thinking about ACT UP, and thinking about other kind of movements in the disability justice and medical justice field. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more either about, yeah, more influences in that regard, or also about your conceptions of space specific to this piece a little further. Maybe they intersect.
I don't think I have formulated a completely different thought around this, but I'm just going to give you bits and pieces of what I did when I finally saw the piece being put together. I was very scared at the very beginning because I didn't think that I had the stamina to do it, and to do it at the scale that it happened. It's one of the largest pieces that I've made, so there goes the contradiction. I began to work aggressively because I also thought that the symptoms that I was developing were very aggressive. And so I really wanted this piece to start with a symptom, which is the scale, that weight scale that you see at the very beginning. And then it opens up and it explodes. And then you just see these things that are overwhelmingly taking over you. I thought of that and I began to look at the space, but also this is in a medical environment. There are on the ground floor of a medical building, and I began to look at the aesthetics from that were already there. If you're not familiar with the space, you don't know what I brought, and you don't know what it's been there, in terms of the architectural of the space. And there's a lot of alteration. And so I also wanted to somehow consciously hide the medical aesthetic and bring my own into it. I wanted to create also a sense of comfort. Many homes that I visited transform their homes because of the family patient. And so rather than having this person on the third floor, it's on the ground floor where a person doesn't have to walk. Usually I saw a lot of hospital beds transformed. And so that took a completely different direction. But I wanted it to be a comfortable, familiar environment within the context of a medical space. And I think that if you go there, you'll see what I'm talking about. So my idea to space with all the installations, it's aggressive, but this one is extremely, extremely aggressive to the point that I couldn't believe. The last day when we're done, which was basically 2 days before the opening, I was amazed, and I couldn't believe that I had the stamina, that I had the energy, and that I had the health to do that. And I feel that at this moment, I don't have any consequences, negative consequences of putting this piece together. but I also undermined, and I go back again, what you've been told by the doctors is different from what you experience on your own, and I was told that there is so many things that are going to go wrong. And I'm thinking, I don't know. I'm still here, you know, and I'm doing, I tell you, it surprises me how I did the largest piece ever that I've ever done now at my age. Because it was like, it's time to scale down. No, it's not. Why exactly? Why have a problem with studio storage?
Exactly.
Let it be. Let it be. I hope I answer your question.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Our final question for the Q&A today will be from Chloe.
Hi, Pepón. Hi, Dan. I echo Eleanor's sentiments. This has been just such an honor to listen to today. Thank you both so, so much. Pepón, my question is, how do you think about memory as a material that is often slippery, personal, and ever-changing in its measurements as adjusted through present experiences? Has your relationship to memory transformed in the creation of these installations and with their activations?
Great question.
Memory leads most of my practice, but I have a really, really strange, and I'm basically thinking about this from a colonial point of view, not even post-colonial, but colonial point of view. Many people have expressed a lot of interest in my archives, and somehow I always think of memory as something that resides in my spirit and in my spirit and in my head more than anything else. And so every time I've worked and every time I develop anything in my practice, I tried really hard to combine those two. My work, my work, it's a reflection of what's going on now, seen through the lens of what happened many, many years ago. And so it's constantly going back and forth. I borrow from the past and I drag it all the way to the present. And so memory plays that role. And but it's not what's that word? It's not when you reminisce.
Right.
It's not romantic at all. It's not romantic at all. It's critical, and it brings that childhood experience in me forward to today in ways that I'm always surprised, and that I'm also ready to deal and see it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Pepón, for that answer, for this conversation today with Dan. Back to you, Eleanor.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chloe. Thank you so, so much, Pepón and Dan. I'm so grateful. And I'll be thinking about this conversation for a really long time. We're going to conclude today with a song, and I wanted to just give you a moment to tell us a little bit about it. And
it's a corny song, but I love it. It's just like, it's a beautiful, beautiful song by Maria Bethânia. She's a Brazilian singer. And it's a child's game. And it's like every day I played this song while I was making this piece, by the way.
Oh.
9 o'clock in the morning until really, really late hours at night, including Saturdays and Sundays. And it is a piece that it's about the opening phrase. It's about not being ashamed that you're happy. And it just goes on from there. But it's a beautiful, beautiful song. I included a translation, a bad translation in Spanish, but it's that's it. I'm not going to say anything else.
Amazing. Well, without further ado, I'll play the song for here.
Pode me dar o tom? Viver e não ter a vergonha de ser feliz. Cantar e cantar e cantar a beleza de ser um eterno aprendiz. Eu sei que a vida devia ser bem melhor e será, mas isso não impede que eu repita. É bonita e é bonita viver e não ter a vergonha de ser feliz. Cantar a beleza de ser um eterno aprendiz. Sei que a vida devia ser bem melhor e será, mas isso não impede que eu repita. É bonita e é bonita a vida. E a vida o que é, diga lá, meu irmão. Ela é a batida de um coração. Ela é uma doce ilusão. A vida, ela é maravilha ou é sofrimento. Ela é alegria ou lamento. O que é, meu irmão? Há quem diga que a vida da gente é um nada no mundo. É uma gota, um tempo que nem dá num segundo. Há quem diga que é um divino mistério profundo. É um sopro do Criador, numa atitude repleta de amor. Você diz que é luta e prazer, ele diz que a vida é viver. Ela diz que melhor é morrer, pois amada não é. E o verbo é sofrer. Só sei que confio na moça, e na moça eu ponho a força da fé. Somos nós que fazemos a vida como der, ou puder, ou quiser. Sempre desejada, por mais que esteja errada. Ninguém quer a morte, só saúde e sorte. E a pergunta roda e a cabeça agita. Eu fico com a pureza da resposta das crianças. A vida é bonita e é bonita viver e não ter a vergonha de ser feliz. Cantar a beleza de ser um eterno aprendiz. Eu sei que a vida devia ser bem melhor e será, mas isso não impede que eu repita. É bonita e é bonita viver e não ter a vergonha de ser feliz. Cantar e cantar e cantar a beleza de ser um eterno aprendiz. A vida deve ser e a vida devia ser bem melhor e será, mas isso não impede que eu repita.
Wow.
Wow, that was amazing. That was such a perfect way to wrap up this amazing afternoon, Pepón. Incredible idea. I'm so glad we got to listen to that together. Thank you so much again, Dan, and thank you, Pepón. Thank you. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you as well to Sarah and Constance for their support ahead of today's NSE. We'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art for sponsoring the NSE and making these daily conversations possible, and also for supporting our archive, which you can view in our YouTube channel, and this conversation will be posted there very soon. The Rail has been free and independent for 24 years, and you can support our writers, production staff, and operations through a link in the chat. And join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a conversation with Aaron Sharef and Christina Yang on the occasion of Sunset Palace at Sycamore Jenkins & Co. Thank you all so much for tuning in this afternoon, and you can all turn on your microphones and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
Pepón.
you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Pepón and
Conversation.
Dan. That was
Thank
amazing.
Thank
you, Eleanor.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Eleanor.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Eleanor.
And
Thanks, Pepón.
bye. Thank you
Bye,
again.
everybody.
Bye, everyone. Bye, everyone.